evidence for white pine blister rust symptoms on western white pine. So this is a known site, and we'll visit this site on our first field trip. Fairly serpentine soil area. There's a high preponderance of western white pine, mature, such as this tree here, that are showing significant individual branch dieback in the crown. So that kind of individual branch dieback in the larger trees is characteristic of branch by branch infections from white pine blister rust, Cronartium ribicola, in a 5-needle pine, which western white pine is. But my main subject is this sapling of western white pine right here in the front, which is a otherwise fairly healthy looking sapling, but the leader shoot is dead. Notice there's flagging on 2 branchlets there, bearing totally brown needles, and a dead leader tip sticking up from between them. So I'm going to try to bend this down and get a close-up of what's really going on here. There's a cankering in this leader tip. It's cankered from the tip back to below where those flagged branchlets are emerging from that shoot axis. Flagged branches are dead, but recently dead. They're holding all the brown needles. Okay, so on the right of those 2 shoots is the part of the shoot below those 2 flagged branchlets, and you can see that it's like a diffuse cankering. There's some splitting and fissuring, etc., and that runs up the leader some way, and you can't see it because it's blocked by the needles. This is white pine blister rust in that particular shoot system. So on a micro scale, it's done to just like what we saw in the larger tree off to the right. That one terminal shoot has been cankered enough by the blister rust that it has died, and the 2 branches that are emerged above the level of the canker descending down the main stem have also died recently. We won't see any signs of the white pine blister rust this time of year, but if you can get close enough to look at this cankering, blistering areas in the late spring, early summer, they're likely to be dusted with substantial crops of light yellow esiospores. So symptomology consistent with white pine blister rust infection on a 5-needle pine, sapling, western white pine. This is a new tree for me. It's a small sized tree of western white pine, Pinus monticola, a 5-needle pine that has symptoms in the crown that are consistent with infection with western or white pine blister rust, Cronartium ribicola. So what am I looking at here? Basically, I saw from a distance that the leader shoot and associated branchlets, the branchlets were all browned out with a fairly rapid death of the needles. But even from this distance, hard to see because it's dark. We've got a major blistering, diffuse cankering in the upper main stem. The whole area of the main stem that is giving rise to the branches that are now bearing brown foliage is cankered up. It's got to be white pine blister rust. We wouldn't find any signs of the blister rust this time of year, being late summer, early fall, but esiospore masses will emit from that cankered tissue in the late spring or the summer. But you can kind of get an idea of the blistering. It's really a diffuse canker where the rust fungus is destroying the cambium, inner phloem, and spreading up and down the main stem from the point of infection. It leads to bark swelling and flaking and fissuring and resinosis, and then during the right time of year, the emission of large masses of esiospores. I've been photographing and videoing this smaller roadside tree of western white pine for quite some time, 15 years maybe. It's getting into a fairly advanced state of decline at this point. Notice the living branch axis on the right has rapidly yellowing needles. All the branches above that, all the way up to the leader tip, long since dead. And on the lower left, the one remaining axis that was alive the last time I was up here is browning out almost completely, the foliage. So yeah, this is progressive attack by white pine blister rust. And in fact, close inspection of this tree will reveal that the branches that are currently recently undergoing mortality or actively undergoing mortality right now with that rapid yellowing of the needles. That's actually the branch death in this case is resulting from a massive main stem infection, which is hard to see, but the blister rust is in the main stem. I'll try to zoom in. Blister rust has been coming down that main stem and completely destroying it. And actually the insertion points for the lower branches that until recently were still bearing healthy green needles, those branches are beginning to get girdled off, actually because of the infection that's in the main stem and the compromising any conductivity out into those remaining living branches. And those living branches are either recently declined and dead, as mentioned, brown needles on the left side, or rapidly declining with rapidly yellowing needles here on the right side. So once these branches go out, maybe a couple of more that are hugging the ground down there right at the bottom, still bearing green foliage. And once that main stem infection goes down far enough, that's going to be all she wrote. So in this case, we're going to have a whole tree mortality event driven directly by infection by Cronartium ribicola, the introduced white pine blister rust. Over and out. Lone sugar pine right beside the road with quite a bit of individual branch dieback up in the crown. So this is symptomology consistent, of course, sugar pines being a 5-needle pine with possible infection with Cronartium ribicola, white pine blister rust. So we're seeing kind of a willy-nilly death or dieback of individual branches scattered through the crown. So macro symptomatology consistent with white pine blister rust infection on sugar pine.